There was a moment in history when every single day you survived was a miracle. And surprisingly, this isn't even the worst era on this list. It's only the beginning, the Ice Age. About 20,000 years ago, during the last glacial maximum, Earth was anything but welcoming. Massive ice sheets, reaching up to 1.9 miles thick, covered vast areas of North America, Europe, and Asia. These glaciers were so enormous that they literally depressed the Earth's crust under their weight. Global temperatures had dropped by about 11 degrees Fahrenheit. It doesn't sound like much, but it was enough to transform the planet into a frozen hellscape. The oceans froze along the coastlines and jungles withered into arid savannas. Survival required brutal logistics. Your day began by trying not to freeze to death, and breakfast depended on what was essentially a suicidal hunt. Simply hunting meant walking for days across snow-covered plains just to track an animal. The energy spent finding food often exceeded the calories it provided. You were armed with stone-tipped spears and group coordination. It was a life-or-death operation where any mistake cost blood. Your competition in the food chain didn't make things easier. The cave lion, Panthera spelaea, one of the largest felines in history, patrolled the same regions as humans. You shared territory with cave bears, dire wolves, and woolly rhinoceroses, all equally hungry. But animals weren't the only threat. The environment itself killed slowly. A sudden temperature shift, an unexpected storm, or falling into icy water could mean certain death from hypothermia within minutes. By that time, Homo sapiens already walked the earth. We had developed tools, fire, rudimentary communication, and even group organization. But none of that guaranteed survival. Every day was a challenge. Constant movement was necessary to find food, uncontaminated water, shelter from the wind, and above all, protection from the predators that ruled the land. Housing often meant huts built from mammoth bones and hardened hides. In present-day Ukraine, archaeologists have discovered human-made structures composed exclusively of more than 150 mammoth bones. These weren't simple shelters. They were evidence of adaptive engineering under extreme conditions. Nighttime temperatures were so severe that prolonged exposure could result in amputations, infections, or death from hypothermia within hours. And if starvation didn't kill you, an infected wound easily could. There were no antibiotics, no vaccines, no emergency rooms, just chewed plants and hope. And yet, even amid this brutality, humans thrived. They invented more sophisticated tools, mastered fire systematically, and even created art. The cave paintings of Lascaux Cave and Chauvet Cave in France reflect symbolic thinking, ritual, and likely spiritual beliefs. They also created bone needles to sew clothing, evidence of a culture refining itself even when the entire planet seemed determined to wipe it out. To this era, we owe humanity's first great leap forward. It was the ultimate training ground in extreme adaptation. And if your ancestors hadn't passed that test, neither you nor I would be here today. The dawn of agriculture. About 10,000 years ago, somewhere in the Fertile Crescent, a group of humans made a decision that would change everything, stop following food, and make food come to them. If you had been born in that time, your life wouldn't necessarily have been easier than that of a Paleolithic hunter. Just different, more isolated, more fragile, and far more subject to the roulette of chance. This is how agriculture was born. Humans left behind their nomadic hunter-gatherer lifestyle and began settling near rivers such as the Tigris River and the Euphrates River, domesticating wheat, barley, and legumes. At first glance, it seemed like monumental progress. Stability, predictability, and more mouths fed with less immediate risk. But this apparent solution brought an entirely new class of problems. With large numbers of people concentrated in a single place, diseases began spreading at a speed never seen before. Early settlements became infection hotspots. With no sewage systems, no waste management, and contaminated water, infant mortality soared. And epidemics became part of the natural cycle of life. Diet also declined in quality. Where food had once been diverse, fish, fruits, insects, lean meat, and roots, it now revolved around just a few carbohydrate-rich crops that were poor in micronutrients. Studies of skeletal remains show that early farmers had higher rates of malnutrition, anemia, rickets, and cavities compared to their hunter-gatherer predecessors. Agriculture also introduced a new threat: dependence on harvests. A single drought could wipe out months of labor and trigger mass starvation. Pests were equally devastating. In places like Catalyuk, one of the earliest known urban settlements, archaeological evidence reveals repeated and severe food crises. Perhaps most ironic of all, by settling down, humans became more vulnerable to conflict. Arable land turned into a strategic resource. From this point on, warfare as a systematic practice began to escalate. The first defensive walls appeared, and with them, organized violence. It was no longer about defending against predators. Now, it was about protecting wheat. Private property did not yet exist as we understand it today. But with sedentary life came the concept of, "This is mine." Social hierarchies emerged. Surplus accumulation began. And with it, the first forms of economic inequality. Interestingly, it was also during this period that humans began burying their dead inside or near their homes. This suggests a profound psychological shift. A place was no longer just shelter, it became part of identity. Humanity had stopped merely being part of the environment and had begun trying to control it. All of this means that the dawn of agriculture was not simply a story of progress, but a point of no return, a bargain with unexpected consequences. Yes, people lived longer, but they also faced more disease, lower overall quality of life, and total dependence on the climate. The Mongol invasions. If you had been born in Eurasia during the 11th century, there was a sign that warned everything was about to end, a cloud of dust on the horizon. What followed wasn't a storm, it was an army led by Genghis Khan, a force that devastated everything in its path with a precision and brutality the world had never seen before. The Mongols built the largest contiguous land empire in history, stretching from the Sea of Japan to the banks of the Danube River. Their strategy combined speed, discipline, and the systematic use of terror as a psychological weapon. They didn't just destroy cities, they turned them into living warnings. In Nishapur, for example, after a revolt, the Mongols reportedly executed more than 100,000 people in retaliation. The Mongol army was a perfectly calibrated machine. Soldiers trained from childhood in archery and horseback riding. Each cavalryman could bring up to 5 horses, switching mounts during battle to prevent exhaustion. This allowed them to travel up to 93 miles per day, far surpassing the mobility of any contemporary army. Their archers were lethal. They used composite bows made of horn, sinew, and wood, capable of firing accurately at distances of over 885 feet. But their true power lay in organization. Units of 10, 100, 1,000, and 10,000 men formed a highly efficient military structure, operating with remarkable coordination even without written communication. For civilian populations, the consequences were apocalyptic. Some cities, such as Merv, were completely depopulated. In other cases, survivors were forced to march as human shields in subsequent sieges. Contemporary accounts describe rivers running red with blood and pyramids built from human skulls at city gates. The impact of the Mongol invasions was not only military. They altered trade routes, toppled entire dynasties, and triggered political crises from China to Persia. Yet paradoxically, the flow of knowledge also increased. Under Mongol rule, the Silk Road was revitalized, connecting cultures as never before. During this period, Chinese technologies such as gunpowder and printing began making their way to Europe. Still, for most people living through that era, none of this outweighed the very real possibility of being killed without warning. It is estimated that between 40 and 60 million people died as a direct or indirect result of the Mongol conquests, up to 10% of the world's population at the time. In some regions, the demographic impact took centuries to reverse. Being born in the 11th century under the shadow of the Mongol Empire was a lottery with few winning outcomes. Either you died, or you lived long enough to watch your culture disappear. The Black Death. In 1347, Europe received an uninvited visitor from Central Asia, hidden among fleas, rats, and silk cargo. Traveling with them was a microscopic killer that, in less than a decade, would trigger the greatest demographic crisis of the Middle Ages. It was the Black Death caused by the bacterium Yersinia pestis. The disease spread uncontrollably due to international trade, poor sanitation, and the complete absence of effective medical knowledge. The first known European cases appeared along the Black Sea coast, but within months, the infection had reached Italian ports, French cities, and German villages. The speed was terrifying. In Marseille, more than 15,000 people died in just 1 month. In Florence, between 50,000 and 60,000 perished. Some cities lost more than 70% of their population within weeks. The symptoms were unmistakable: swollen lymph nodes, high fever, blackened extremities from tissue necrosis, and vomiting blood. In its pneumonic form, simply breathing the same air as an infected person could mean certain death. With no antibiotics and no understanding of contagion, the plague spread like a biological wildfire. But this was not just a health crisis, it was total collapse. Agricultural production stalled, international trade fractured, thousands of villages were abandoned. In some regions, there was no one left alive to bury the dead. Mass graves were dug, and bodies were thrown in by the dozens. The psychological impact was devastating. Conspiracy theories multiplied. Some blamed Jewish communities. Others claimed divine punishment. This led to pogroms and massacres in cities such as Strasbourg. Fear triggered collective hysteria. Groups like the Flagellants marched across Europe, publicly whipping themselves in ritual acts of penance, hoping physical suffering would spare them from death. Even medieval medicine, already fragile, was completely overwhelmed. Physicians wore bird-beak-shaped masks filled with flowers and vinegar, believing pleasant smells would protect them from contaminated air. Many died alongside their patients, never understanding what had killed them. In the long term, however, the Black Death reshaped Europe. The dramatic population decline created severe labor shortages that destabilized the feudal system. For the first time, peasants gained bargaining power against lords. Some historians argue that this imbalance became one of the deeper roots of the Renaissance and the eventual end of medieval social order. But in that moment, all you knew was that you could go to bed with a fever and never wake up. Between 30% and 60% of Europe's population vanished in just 5 years. In absolute numbers, historians estimate that between 75 and 200 million people died worldwide. Being born during the Black Death was like playing Russian roulette with 5 bullets in the chamber. The eruption of the Toba supervolcano, about 74,000 years ago on the island of Sumatra in present-day Indonesia, the planet witnessed one of the greatest natural catastrophes in its entire history, the eruption of the Lake Toba. This event was so massive that it altered the global atmosphere, devastated entire ecosystems, and may have pushed the human species to the brink of extinction. Toba released more than 670 cubic miles of volcanic material, an almost unimaginable volume. For perspective, it was at least 5,000 times more powerful than the 1980 eruption of Mount St. Helens, and roughly 100 times more powerful than the eruption of Krakatoa, which had already darkened skies across much of the planet. The consequences were immediate and long-lasting. Within days, ash spread across Southeast Asia, India, and parts of Africa. In some areas, ash deposits reached up to 20 feet thick, but the worst came afterward. By blocking solar radiation, the eruption triggered a volcanic winter that lasted between 6 and 10 years, with climatic effects persisting for more than 1,000 years. Global temperatures are estimated to have dropped between 5 degrees Fahrenheit and 27 degrees Fahrenheit. This sudden cooling was enough to collapse food chains. Plants died first, herbivores followed, then the predators that depended on them. Many large animals went extinct. Humans, already few in number and highly vulnerable, faced a climate apocalypse armed with little more than stone tools and fire. Modern genetic analyses point to what scientists call a population bottleneck. According to this theory, the global human population may have been reduced to just a few thousand breeding individuals, possibly fewer than 3,000 worldwide. This could help explain why modern humans share relatively low genetic diversity compared to many other species. During this critical period, survival did not depend on strength, but on adaptability. Some groups sought refuge in coastal caves, particularly in what is now South Africa, where archaeological evidence suggests small human clans learned to extract resources from the sea, shellfish, seaweed, and salt. Insolite. They became extreme generalists, innovating under pressure, and may have developed more complex forms of language and culture in response to the crisis. Archaeological remains from this era show striking gaps. For centuries, many regions appear to have been sparsely populated or entirely abandoned. Migration routes were disrupted. In some areas, human evolution seemed to freeze. And yet, against all odds, a few survived. Thanks to that small handful of individuals who endured the darkness, the cold, and the hunger, you are here. If even they had failed, humanity would have been nothing more than a geological footnote. Toba was not merely the worst time to be born. It was the moment when human existence hung by an invisible thread. If you enjoyed this content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more videos about fascinating moments and curiosities from human history.